So welcome to the Chemical and Materials room of the Got a Degree, Now What panel. And tonight we have 5 panelists, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves because I think then they can fully tell you about what they do. But I'll just introduce everyone by name first. First, we have Nicholas Wilkins, who's a grad student at the University of Alberta. We have Rena Feng, who's an E.I.T and utilities lead for phase 1 at LNG Canada at Shell. If you could maybe turn your video on if you're comfortable with that. I'm not sure if Rena's here. All right, maybe we're having a lag or something. Anyway, I'll continue. Rosalynn MacGregor, P.Eng and Senior Process Safety Engineer at Sapphire Engineering Services. And Brent, oh, there's Rena.
Hey, sorry. Yeah, I was kind of trying to work out all the kinks. You guys can hear me though, right?
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect. Thank you. And the last two we have, Brent Dorman, who's P.Eng and Vice President of Operations at Corrosion Service. And Courtney Brown, also P.Eng Environmental Engineer at Cenovus. And I guess we'll get started in the same order. So Nicholas, if you want to tell us more about what you do, your areas of expertise.
Sure. My name's Nicholas Wilkins. I did my master's here at the University of Alberta, and I'm currently doing my PhD at the University of Alberta. I am a graduate research assistant, which essentially means I'm doing research, academic research, also sometimes industrial research when we have partners from outside. And I work under the supervision of Arvind Rajendran and Stephen Kuznicki. I'm also a teaching assistant, so if you guys are seniors in U of A, you've probably seen me in, what's the class? CME 265, Process Analysis. I've been the TA for that class almost every semester since 2017, and I was actually the instructor 1 year as well. Should I elaborate on anything else?
No, that's great. Thank you. Just a short introduction. I think we can get, we have some questions lined up from people, and we also are encouraging everyone in the chat. So Brianne, another chemical engineering student, she's going to be the tech moderator, and she's going to go through the Q&As and monitor the chat. So we encourage everyone who's attending to ask questions via the chat. That would be great. Thank you, Nicholas. You were my TA for 265, so.
Remember you.
All right, and then Rena, if you don't mind going next.
Yeah, for sure. I graduated from the University of Alberta in chemical engineering in 2017. And then after I did a chemical engineering co-op program, so I did multiple internships with Shell. So I started off working at Albion, which is the oil sands, and then went to Scotford, the upgrader. And then after that, I was hired as a E.I.T and then worked within Shell a little bit, and then now working on LNG Canada, so seconded to LNG Canada, working on the project in Kitimat right now as the utilities engineer.
Rena, and on to you, Rosalynn.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is Rosalynn MacGregor, and I did my master's at U of A in chemical engineering. I don't know if he's there anymore, but my thesis advisor was Al Mather, and my degree was in thermodynamics. My bachelor's is from UBC, so I changed universities between getting my bachelor's and my master's, which was interesting, more interesting than I had expected. And then I got a job at Scotford Refinery out of U of A. Worked there for 6 years as process engineer, operations engineer. I also did a short stint at the styrene plant next door, also a Shell facility. Then I was transferred to Jumping Pound Gas Plant, which is a sour gas plant west of Calgary, and worked there for I was transferred down to head office in the process engineering group. You can tell I want to forget that part of my life. It was yucky. I didn't like working in head office, but I learned a lot there. That was a year and a half. And then I got a transfer up to Peace River, where I worked in heavy oil plant, SAGD plant. That's been sold now. I worked there for 5 years. Then I was transferred down to Jumping Pound, where I worked in the gas plant as the technical manager. So I had 16 people reporting to me for 3 years. But in all that time, my husband wanted to move to a place that had hills. He didn't want to be on the prairies. So for various reasons, I left Shell from Jumping Pound, and we moved here to where I am now in Enderby, BC, which is near Salmon Arm, halfway between Calgary and Vancouver. We live in the bush on the end of in a dead end road. And I run my own company doing process safety engineering, which is basically helping plants not to blow up. So I travel a lot, but I've been here for almost 20 years doing this job now.
Great. Thank you, Rosalynn. And it's really nice. I was just there recently coming through to Kelowna. And we'll move on to Brent Dorman.
Hi, everyone. I graduated from the Material Engineering Program co-op in 2003. My last co-op term was actually with this company, Corrosion Service. And I started out as a field tech, summer student, and signed a contract after school. And I've been working here 17 years now. So I guess I'm a bit of a lifer. I've done in the organization. I've been a field technician, field engineer, office engineer, project manager, office manager, branch manager, and now an executive within the company. So my career has definitely transitioned quite a bit from an actual pure engineering role into more of a management and even a business role. So I might have a bit of a unique non-technical perspective for some of you students as well. Short and sweet.
Great, thanks. And last but not least, Courtney.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thanks for having me here tonight. So I graduated from the Materials Engineering program in 2012. I also did the co-op option. I was very fortunate in my final work term, it was with Husky Energy, to secure a full-time position with them. So when I finished school, I completed their new grad program. So at that time, the program was 4 6-month rotations throughout the company. So I completed two rotations in Lloydminster, one doing production engineering, one doing projects with the upgrader. My third one was in St. John's, Newfoundland. I had the opportunity to go offshore for a short while. Nothing like 2 weeks, nothing major, not an expert by any means, but it was a great experience. And then finally, I ended up back here in Calgary. So that was for a facilities engineering role, and I stayed within that role for about 6 years, and then it was time for a change. So recently, actually earlier this year, I moved into the AIR team as part of environmental services. So I look after the governance side for methane and greenhouse gas emissions. And I'm currently taking a few classes through continuing ed at U of A through the renewable energy series. So I'm actually in a course right now for introduction to electricity and power generation. So looking forward to pursuing my designation in sustainable energy technology professional.
Courtney, and we just want to thank all 5 of our panelists for taking the time to be here tonight and answer everyone's questions. We appreciate the social aspect of this, I think, especially in the COVID era. So we just have a few general questions that people have written in previously to start. And you guys can feel free as panelists to jump in, or I can call everyone out, I guess, by name, Fallen told you to do it. So I guess our first one is, how did your time at the U of A prepare you for your engineering career? If anyone wants to in first.
I'll jump in on that one. The career path that I took right after I graduated was not a career path. Certainly the industry, the company, it was not on my radar. But I was able to be successful in it. So I think certainly the education that I received was very valuable to teach me some of the basic concepts that I needed to learn in the new job. But I think a bigger aspect of it is the education allowed me to learn how to be a professional, learned how to problem solve, learned how to interact with people, learn how to deal with difficult situations, timelines, all of these sorts of things that are necessary when you have a professional career. And I think that's kind of an important aspect for me, and even to get across to the students in a session like this is I would say, don't get too hung up about the very specific content that you learn within your educational career. That's just a very small part of it. And there's a good chance that you may not actually end up studying or working in the direct field that you went to education for. So all of those intangible things can really set you on the right career path.
That's great. Thanks, Brent. Nice to keep an open mind for sure, I think. Rosalynn, I saw you had your hand up. Did you?
Yeah, when I did my part lab work, part computer modeling. And little did I know, but my gas chromatograph had a bad column in it. I struggled with that for over a year, trying to get decent, repeatable results from my lab experiments, which extended my degree time trying to get my master's there. And I consulted with experts. Dr. Mather, suggested I talk to people in the chemistry department, and, on and on and on. Everybody said, it's not the column. Well, it's not the column. So here's all these experts saying, it's not the column. Try this, try that, try the other thing. I ended up, I had a buddy from one of my summer jobs. He was a chemical tech. And he said, well, how hard would it be to test whether it's the column? So he came to the lab one Saturday with me, and we just switched my column with somebody else's column in the same lab, another a postdoc guy, and it was the column. So the answer is, don't trust the experts. When you've got a problem, the person who's going to solve it, if you really want to solve it, is you. So I lost a year. It took me a year to learn that, but take it from me. Don't necessarily believe the experts.
That's some good advice. Thank you, Rosalynn.
That's what I learned. Yeah, my biggest lesson.
Great, thank you. Nicholas, Courtney, or Rena, do you have anything to add?
Specifically for me, I'm trying to become a teacher of some sort, or an educator, whether that's professor or teaching at high school or something. And for me, through my master's, U of A, I got a lot of opportunities to try to teach, and I actually got to be an instructor last fall as well for CME 265. But as well as that, like, if you're a graduate student, you'll have the opportunity sometimes to also mentor undergraduate students that want to do undergraduate research. So you can also get some like basic managerial skills for that. At least you have someone that you could delegate work to. And I also was lucky enough to have an internship during my master's that I would say was my first real experience in industrial research, which wouldn't have been possible without what I was doing at the U of A.
Great, thanks, Nicholas. Courtney or Rena? And you guys don't have to answer every question also. Not trying to put you on the spot, but I just want to make
No,
sure.
all good. I think one of the biggest things I probably take away from university is just asking questions. I remember like, you know, sometimes, you know, when you go to a lecture, not everything is super clear. And then when you have to kind of do assignments, I always had a lot of questions and I use kind of the TA office hours. And I think that skill has really helped me throughout my first several years at Shell and even now. And I think even at the beginning, I was always a little bit shy about asking questions because you always think, okay, does everyone know this? Especially if you feel like you're the most junior one in the team, which is definitely true in my case. But I think like it's so important to ask those questions. And I found that, you know, sometimes when you ask, you realize that it's not a silly questions, not something that everyone already knows. And it's honestly like how you learn. I genuinely believe that, you know, without asking questions, you don't really understand, you know, and yeah, so I think that's the biggest thing I probably took away from university, and also just time management as well and prioritization. Something I took away as well.
Thanks, Rena. And sorry, go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, the only thing I'd add, I agree with everyone, the points they made before, especially asking for help. There's a lot of times I remember in first year, first semester that I wish I asked for help a lot sooner than I did, and definitely learned lessons from that. I think the biggest thing I took away is working collaboratively, like in the workplace. As much as sometimes we want to work independently and just shut everyone out, it's great to have inclusion and diversity of thought at the table, because a lot of time, if you're trying to figure something out, you might have the best idea and that might be the case, but someone else might have a different perspective. So I think all those times working in design projects or lab groups and working with various people, something challenging that doesn't go away in the workplace. So I think having that experience definitely helps coming into my career.
Definitely. Thanks, Courtney. And our next introductory type question is, if you could go back and change one thing about your personal journey at the U of A, what would that be? So it could be academic or personal. If anyone wants to start, or I can start the list here.
I can share, kind of builds on what I just said about asking for help sooner. Coming into university, I didn't really have to try that hard in school. So it just magically, I figured it out somehow. It just did. So I didn't have the best study skills. And that actually resulted in me failing a course first semester. So that was a hard lesson to learn. I got an A second time around in the course, but had I reached out, asked more questions instead of just trying to figure out alone, I think I would have been in a much better place and more successful that first semester.
Great. Thanks, Courtney. I think we've all been in first year coming in and thinking we know it all. I know I was. Anyone want to jump in, or we can move on if no one.
A quick one, being in the co-op program, the first couple of work terms, I was extremely limited on what I was willing to accept for co-op jobs. I limited myself in location. I limited myself in the type of work, the type of field. I just kind of took it for granted that I could get a job that I wanted right away. And, it worked out, thank goodness. But I think I would definitely give advice to keep that field wide open on what jobs you apply for, and even take shots at jobs that you really didn't think you'd have any interest in places you never thought you would be, especially considering the environment now with COVID and everything, and how challenging it is to find work. Open your eyes a little bit to things that are outside your norms, and I wish I would have done that more.
I have something to add to that. I'm not Canadian. I'm from the US, and for me, moving to Alberta was extremely far from where I was living in Colorado. And it wasn't something I looked at initially at first. I tried looking at graduate schools in Colorado because I thought that was the obvious choice. But this has been an amazing experience for me, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But it wasn't something that initially I looked into. So definitely give these opportunities, even ones that you might not initially or be skeptical of. Give them a chance.
Definitely, that's some solid advice. Thank you, guys. If does anyone else want to jump in, or we can move to the next question? It's up to you guys. All right, we'll move on. We have a question that was panel specific, actually, that was written in when people registered. And it says, what kind of jobs are available to a master's engineering grad from chemical engineering? Maybe Nicholas can elaborate on that, or Rosalynn.
So so it's slightly different. I had to write a thesis. So for a master's in science, most jobs, you can get quite a few different types of jobs. I know people that work as techs, a lot of different oil companies and chemical companies in northern Alberta, Edmonton, or Scotford, these places. But you can also get them as like a research assistant in industry as well. A lot of people also say at least a third of them try to go do their PhD as well. With the PhD, you'll more likely be able to find a research job slightly easier, but it also kind of closes off some of the jobs that you'd be able to get as a master's student. But I think Rosalynn might be able to elaborate on this more.
Well, I have a Master of Science as well, not an M.Eng. And my Master of Science is in chemical engineering, and my bachelor's is in chemical engineering. So as far as my employers at the time at Scotford Refinery, when I got my master's degree, it basically got me $100 more a month on my salary. So that was good. The other thing was when I did get promotions, there was at the time, I don't know, it might still be out there, but there was this thing about, oh, that's favoritism. She got that promotion because she's a woman and things like that. But, you'd say masters. And then everybody went, oh, well, okay then. So it was all right. I still had friends. But it's more what it did for me in working hard at my job, solving problems. And I know Courtney said, ask questions. Yes, ask questions, but first work at it a little bit to try to solve it yourself. And remember what you've done to try to fix it or solve it. And so you can go and ask your questions in a prepared way, and not just like, how do I do this? How do I do that? What's this? What's that? But, come with some knowledge about, I've tried this and this is what I got. I've tried that and this is what I got. So that they can see you're making an effort and a contribution. And I learned that in my master's work. And yeah, that helped me more in my career than actually having the letters behind my name.
Great. Thank you, guys. We have a question from the chat from Julie, and she says, what's been your most memorable project or experience at your job? If anyone wants to jump. Maybe. Oh, go ahead, Rosalynn.
I've been an engineer for over 30 years, so I've got lots of stories like that. But I think one of the best ones was I worked at Scotford Refinery, and I was assigned to some specific process units. And then I was moved over to the styrene plant, and the styrene plant had a specific problem with a waste stream. And this shows when you have, there was a fence, and the people in the refinery dealt with the people in the refinery. The people in the styrene plant dealt with the people in the styrene plant. There were a few people who had moved back and forth, but I was one of the youngest and least experienced ones. But I looked at that waste stream that we had a problem with. It was causing environmental issues. And I thought, hey, this waste stream could be a feedstock to the unit I just left at the refinery. So I contacted Mark Baker, who succeeded me in the position in the refinery, and we talked it over. And we ended up running a heat traced insulated piece of pipe. I think it was a 2-inch piece of pipe over the fence. It was about 1 kilometer long. It paid out in 3 months. I bet you that piece of pipe is still out there over 30 years later, making money and saving their boilers from sending smoke into the sky at the styrene plant and being a feedstock at the refinery. So I think, you know, you have silos in businesses, and people kind of deal in their own teams, but that lateral knowledge between groups doing similar tasks, if you can make those connections, whether it's you or somebody else, like talking to the person who works in the other plant, even though nobody else has ever done it, that sort of networking can make your company a lot of money and save the environment and advance your career. So something to think about when you get out there and get your job is to, you know, broaden your horizons a little bit and look outside of your own job.
Definitely. Thank you, Rosalynn. Brent, do you want to in, since you've probably had some good experiences with projects getting into a VP role?
Sure. Done an awful lot of different types of projects. You know, in my business, I'm mostly involved in pipeline and tankage integrity. But some of the most memorable projects are just in locations away from here. So I've managed to travel, you know, across Canada, all throughout the US. I've worked on projects in Europe. I've worked on projects in the Caribbean, and it's just really cool and interesting to see how the same principles apply in different geographic areas, because in many cases they're quite a bit different. There's a lot of unique variables. So I don't have any specific projects, but you know, that really does form some memories for my career, is just all the different places.
Thanks, Brent. And from Julie, again, we have an extension question for Rosalynn. How did you figure out that the waste stream could be a feed stream for another unit?
It was a big problem environmentally, and we were afraid the government was going to come down on us and give us a rough time, and ultimately they shut the plant down. So I thought, well, what is this stuff? So I looked at the I think we had liquid gas chromatograph results. So we had the chemical composition of this particular stream, and knowing what my plant on the other side of the fence used as a feedstock and recycled to change into benzene, I looked at that stream and I thought to myself, 80% of this stuff we could use as a feedstock to that unit. It was just my background knowledge of doing your standard process engineering work. Oh, I've got another really good story. I was sent on a course, similar, it was aromatics unit. There was a recirculating solvent stream in my unit, and I was sent on a course before I actually got the process engineering job on that unit, but they knew I would be going there. So I listened really hard. I didn't really know much about the unit. It was a difficult course because of that. But one thing I took home from that course was monitor your solvent. If your solvent is healthy, your unit is healthy. So I'd go down to the lab twice a week and get a little vial of sample and look at my solvent to see if it was clean and the right color. It was supposed to be the color of beer, and I'm an engineer, I know the color of beer. So I would check it, and after about a year on that unit, I would roll it around to look for dirt. I noticed there was oil on the glass. So I went immediately down to the operations leader's office, and I said, Keith, it looks like there's oil on the inside of this glass. He immediately got on the phone and told the operators to shut down that unit because we had an exchanger leak. Turned out they'd had one before I got on that unit, and they'd lost a few $1 million in having to replace the solvent and shutting down and starting back up and all that. And so in that, just looking at that vial twice a week, I saved the company millions of dollars. So you just never know, you just do your job the best you can, and keep your eyes and ears open, and ask questions about, why is this like this? This is different. And yeah, you can make a real difference.
Thank you. That's great. Maybe on the topic of environmental things, we can switch it to Courtney. Do you have any memorable projects or experiences? I know environmental things have become kind of in the news, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of that where you work. So maybe I'll throw it off to you.
Yeah, so in my current role, I started at the start of the pandemic, so it's a great time to start a new job. But so I've only been in the role for less than a year now. But over the past, I think, 10 months now, there has been a lot of changes and updates to the regulation. Most recently, the federal government announced equivalency. So basically, for methane. So the federal government put out a rule regarding the regulation of methane. And then they allow the provinces to come up with their own way to meet or exceed what the federal government has in place. So BC had that in place at the start of the year. And then both Saskatchewan and Alberta were granted their equivalency agreements in the fall. So that's a big win because it allows the provinces to regulate themselves, and that's checked. The emissions are checked on an annual basis. So it might not sound exciting for someone who's not in the environmental realm, but it was exciting in our department when that came through.
No, that sounds interesting. Rena, you're working on the LNG project. That's a pretty big project, so I'm sure you also have maybe something memorable or maybe that everyone should know kind of thing from your perspective.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a kind of a lot of memorable moments for me, but I think just reflecting on kind of the past year, one thing that kind of stood out to me was like a recent issue we had on a sizing of one of our cooling systems, and working with the contractor to resolve that and coming to like an agreement. And I think it's the difficult part with the LNG Canada project is that it's a lump sum contract. So there's always sometimes I feel like I'm doing the job of an engineer and a lawyer at the same time. So getting resolution on that was one of the kind of the key event for me this year. And I think the reason why that felt really rewarding is because it kind of I don't know how it went up, but it went up to like the director of the project. And I think it's always like, I feel like typically, a lot of the times, like you're just doing your job and you're doing your work, and you think, especially as an engineer, sometimes you think, okay, I'm contributing, but are these just small issues? It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And seeing some of that kind of just being recognized by like senior leadership was really like a big moment for me, because I think sometimes you feel that as an engineer, you don't make an impact, especially when you're working for a large company. So I think that was one of the key moments for me, and just realizing that, these small changes that you make may seem small to you, but it's a big deal. Yeah.
And Nicholas, maybe you also have something to add from perspective?
Sure. So some of the projects that I've worked on, all gas phase separations. So how do we get one gas separated, purified from another, or bulk phase? The most recent one I've been looking at is designing pressure swing adsorption columns for the separation of methane from nitrogen. So something that's going to be probably more relevant as we go on. So we have a lot of methane trapped in natural gas wells that is what we call sub quality. You can't really burn it as is because it has a very high nitrogen content in water and so on. So I'm looking at ways to remove all of these impurities. I'm doing this through computers and also through design experimental research. I've also looked at carbon capture, which is something I know they're actually doing up at Scotford and Shell. That was actually one of the more memorable moments of what I've been doing here as well, because as an academic, we don't get a whole lot of opportunities to actually see stuff that gets built. So it was very cool to see massive pump in a room the size of like dice. It was pretty amazing to see something like that and have it not be in the abstract. But designing systems like that, also pressure swing adsorption columns to remove carbon dioxide from flue gas. So coal-fired flue or natural gas-fired flue. So we're looking at an extreme purification in both of those cases. For regulatory regulations require that you need to get it above about 90% carbon dioxide, and the stream is 5-10% carbon dioxide. And with a gas stream, it becomes very difficult. Unfortunately, with pressure swing adsorption, it might not be the best way, but there are other ways that people look into it as well, using like amines and liquid absorption. I've also designed some systems. This hasn't been anything I've been published on, but I've helped people with this. We've collaborated a little bit with this company called Oxygen Solutions, which is in Eastern Edmonton, and they design air purification systems. It's also using pressure swing adsorption, but you're essentially taking the 21% oxygen that you're breathing and getting it up to, it does get it up to European medical standards. It doesn't get it to American and Canadian medical standards, but it's good enough for aquaculture and for agricultural uses. So I've been involved in these projects experimentally and computationally. And a lot of design now is done computationally with the aid of experiments. So a lot of this has been collaborative or in tandem with that.
That's great. Thank you, Nicholas. We have a few questions in the chat popping up here, so I'll just go in order. From Kenny, he says, due to lack of experience, I feel I may not be able to get an E.I.T position immediately after graduation. What are some other career options that I could pursue that would help me develop skills required for an E.I.T position? Maybe Rena, if you'd like to start.
For me, when I graduated, actually the economy was pretty bad as well, and I wasn't sure if I was gonna really get a job either. So for me, the first thing that I was gonna do if I didn't get a E.I.T position was actually going back to get a graduate degree. And I think it also just depends on kind of what you're interested in. But I think getting graduate, thought that was going to help me gain more skills, first of all, but also just gain also just that time management skills, and also just not kind of sit around. So I personally, for me, I think other options would be to getting a graduate degree, but obviously that kind of depends on what you're interested in. Yeah.
Thanks, Rena. Courtney, do you have anything to add as well?
The only thing I would add, because when I graduated is in 2012, so the economy was a lot better than it is now. But I think really focus on what you want your job to be. Like if you're, let's say you want, I don't know, go into like data analytics. make sure that like how you're branding yourself is data analytics. Like make sure you're taking courses. If you're sharing stuff on LinkedIn, brand yourself as that person. And so when people and your contacts think like, oh, I might have an EIT position, then you're coming to mind because they view you as someone who's an expert, to be expert in that area. So try to, if you're struggling to find position, brand yourself and make sure that people think of you and you come to their mind first when they think of an opportunity. So in terms of that, like you could with organizations like if you're going to petroleum companies, SPE would be a good option to volunteer with, just so you are aligning your career interests with your skills.
Thanks, Courtney. That's a really great point. I don't think a lot of people think about is how you brand yourself online these days is so important. Brent, do you have anything to add or would like to say anything on that topic?
Sure. I would encourage people, especially if you're trying to find a new position after you graduate and you're having a difficult time and a fair bit of time goes by without any success, don't be married to the term E.I.T or engineer in training or entry-level engineering position. Expand your horizons a little bit. Keywords that you put in a search bar to see what available postings are out there can be severely limited if you're looking specifically for search terms E.I.T and stuff. Look for additional terms, technologist, technician, that might not be your desired role, but it might be an entry level into an organization where you can either gain some experience or use that as a stepping stone into something that is more geared toward a specific engineering training role. So, again, just keep those options open.
Great. Thank you, Brent. Rosalynn, do you have any advice?
When I originally graduated in 1983, oil prices were way low. It was a bad recession, and there were 3 students for every job, every chemical engineering job. So a degree, now what? Get another degree. That's what I did. So there is that. I support Brent's statement about looking for other avenues to get your foot in the door. I'm a chemical engineer, and one thing you can consider is joining some of these associations like the American Institute of Chemical Engineers and attending their conferences. And I've highlighted on here in yellow, you can see the things that did not exist when I graduated. There's a whole bunch of new fields out there that I don't know anything about, but there are these fields, helping with medical stuff and biotechnology and nanotechnology and synthetic fuels, waste management. There's so much out there, but you don't really know about it unless you get into some of these organizations and see what's out there and get to meet some of these people, even if it is only online. There was a student who worked, like a summer student who worked at a company I worked at. I spent 2 years with Jacobs Engineering in Calgary. I commuted from Enderby each week, and then I would fly home on Fridays. And he asked for if I could give him a connection for a tour of one of the facilities I worked at. So even just contacting one of these plants or refineries or something and arranging to get a tour with somebody can make a good impression on them. If you can't get an interview, they may give you a tour, and that can be a way to get in. So, and I lent him my Nomex coveralls and covered up my name with a patch, and he went up to Peace River and he got a tour of the place, and he did end up getting a job, not there, but somewhere else. So you just keep chipping away at it, you know?
That's great. Thanks, Rosalynn. Nicholas, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, I agree with the professional societies. Recently, during COVID, I joined one for adsorption, which is the specific field that I'm in. I also did go to the IACHE conference in November. There's a specific thing for my area of research is there as well. And I was extremely surprised about how just being active in professional society can open doors for you. Actually, even before COVID happened, I got offered a internship over the summer at Dow, just from talking to these people and talking about my research. So, and this wouldn't have been possible without just joining these societies, talking with people. So, I was very surprised. I wasn't expecting anything like that.
It's good. Great. Thank you, Nicholas. And on that note, also make sure to check out the expo that has a lot of groups and societies that are boothing, I guess, at the expo. And also there's a networking event after this. Just there. We have another question in the chat from Kyle. And he says, does GPA matter to an employer? Also, I'm a first-year student trying to find an engineering-related job for the summer. Any tips or suggestions about interviews, resumes, cover letters, networking, etc.? Maybe we'll start with Rosalynn, sorry.
It's difficult right now with COVID, but I have been attending web meetings and webinars in my field. And you can get in the chats and talk back and forth and ask questions just like you guys are here. And the other thing is at the end, they usually say, oh, you know, if anybody wants to contact me, here's my email address. So there's sort of contacts in our fields online right now. And a PEGA would be a good place to search for things. I attended a really interesting webinar a week or so ago about forest fires and the connection between foresters and in siting facilities for forest fire, you know, being sensitive about where forest fires can threaten your facility and burn it down and how to prevent that. It was very interesting. So if you haven't gotten into a PEGA stuff, I would encourage you to look at that because it's very specific to where you are.
Great, thank you. Courtney, anything to add, maybe for resume or cover letter tips?
Yeah, so just to build on whether or not GPA matters, depends on the organization. I've seen people who have a 4.0 and have great like people skills. They're fantastic technically and personally. I've seen people who have the perfect grades and their business skills still need to be developed, which is perfectly okay too. I think it's good to have the balance between the two, but it all depends. It's down to you as a person. So I think that's really what your employer is looking at. It might get you in through like a screening process having a high GPA, but once you hit that interview, it's ultimately you in the room and who you are as a person if they like you. In terms of a cover letter, my biggest piece of advice is if you're applying for lots of jobs, don't use a template cover letter. Try to tailor it to the position that you want so you can really demonstrate to the employer why you want it, why it'd be a good fit. Oftentimes they will be able to see through that this is just some generic cover letter that you've put together. So really put the time and effort into tailoring it for your application.
Definitely. I heard a story of someone who forgot to change the company name because that's all they were changing in the templates for cover letters. So I'm sure that doesn't look very good. Brent, maybe you have something to add to that?
Sure. I look at hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes every year. And I've done actually some research in kind of HR about how often most recruiters spend looking at a resume. And it's typically 30 seconds or less, especially when you have lots of positions where you have a huge volume of applicants. And, I remember going through the co-op program, and they had a nice little template for what your resume should look like. And almost everybody followed it to a T. And in hindsight, I kind of wish they didn't do that, because what they do is that creates, you don't stick out. Every single resume looks the same. And when you're busy and you're looking for that needle in a haystack, you are not spending an awful lot of time as a recruiter filtering through those. And it's amazing how often just, a splash of color, an obscure format of a resume, it absolutely stands out. And whether the content is of that candidate is good or not, I read the whole thing cover to cover because it's so unique. And I really would encourage people to do that. There's probably limits as to how crazy you can get with a resume and a cover letter. But even some of the cover letters where it's not, the standard, I did very well in school and I'm going to be very good for your organization. Those are great. But some people are really creative. I've had cover letters where people have literally challenged me and say, the cover letter reads, "You have to hire me. And if you don't hire me, you're making the biggest mistake in your organization." And that sort of stuff is fantastic. Now, there's probably some people that would throw that in the trash, but I think it's just so unique and refreshing. So don't be afraid to be nonconformist here a little bit with some of this, because there is an awful lot of competition, especially for entry-level jobs right out of school, right? So just try to be unique.
Definitely. Thanks, Brent. That's a great perspective. Rena, did you have anything to add? And don't feel pressured to answer.
No, I totally agree kind of with what Courtney said earlier. And I guess yeah, I don't know about other companies, but I feel like having a perfect GPA is not that important, but I think definitely having a good GPA is. And I think it definitely gets your foot in the door when it comes to getting your first job. So I do think it's important to have a good one, not a perfect one, but a good one for your first job. And I think it matters less and less after that. Yeah.
Rena and Nicholas, what about you? Do you think GPA matters, or any resume cover letter tips?
I think the biggest thing is a lot of people don't notice the skills that they even have. One of the things I was most surprised of when I was applying to graduate school was I was lucky when I was a teenager. I worked as a construction worker. I would, do very basic stuff like put up sidewalls and roofs and things like this. And I had that on my resume. And that was the thing my graduate supervisor asked me first. He's like, "Oh, I see that you've worked as a construction worker." He wanted someone to work in the lab. That means I was essentially going to be a plumber with a chemical engineering degree. And that's how I got the job, I think. My GPA was okay, but he picked somebody that also knew how to use tools. And it wasn't something even I thought of. I just had it there because it was one of the jobs I worked. So I think sometimes we overlook the things that make us stand out anyways. So just, I guess, make sure that you include those specific qualities on your CV or cover letter, your resume.
Yeah, thank you. I think sometimes, especially as students, maybe we're not as confident trying to beef ourselves up in a cover letter. So that's some great advice. Thank you, everyone. Another question in the chat from Vadim is oil prices in the upcoming presidency paint a clear picture for Alberta's export industry. What industries can chemies look forward to in our evolving economy? Rosalynn, I saw you waving. Was this for this question?
No, but I have something to say about that question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, in addition to, and I really support what Brent said about being unique. A lot of these, classes or guidelines for your resume or your sanitize it and generalize it to such a point that you really don't stand out. Remember, you're an individual, and if you fit for a company, that individuality is going to be what they want. So make your cover letter individual to you. Make your resume individual to you. Say how you felt about things you've achieved, what you're really proud of in yourself. And for what Nicholas said about, things you may not recognize in yourself, I didn't do this when I was young, but I've encouraged my sons to do it, is when they've done some work, ask the people they've done work for a letter of reference right away before they even leave that job. Get a letter of reference, because that's when they know what they've been impressed by. If you go and say, oh, references this person, by the time the company that might want to investigate your application goes back to them and asks them about you, they might even have forgotten what was special about you. So ask for a letter of reference while you're working for them, near the end of what you've done for them. Doesn't matter what type of job it is. It's personality strengths that really clinch the job once you've got the GPA to actually get an interview. So yeah, we're all special and we all fit somewhere. So, work on those strengths, recognize those in yourself, and let others recognize them in you so you can present that package.
That's some great advice. I wrote that one down. I didn't even think to ask people I've worked for before. Sorry if I skipped you for that one.
Yeah, it's usually you think it's work to them, but it's actually they love to do it. I mean, it's a compliment to be asked to do a reference for someone.
That's great.
So don't hesitate.
Thank you very much for that one. Oh, sorry. Back to the question with what industries can chemies look forward to? I'm assuming other than oil and gas, which is kind of what we're focused on here in Alberta, I suppose. Rosalynn, did you have anything to add there?
I attended another webinar. You probably have heard somehow that U of A has had one of its professors win a Nobel Prize, and that's for a vaccine, hepatitis C, I think it was. So he knows a lot about vaccine technologies and the creation of vaccines and the facilities to make vaccines. And he said, the U of A is an ideal location to produce vaccines. I think, and I hope that Edmonton could become a center for biomedical advances and biomedical companies. And there is a place for chemical engineers in biomedical and vaccine development. So if you don't want to do oil and gas, look into that.
Yeah, that's very prevalent now with COVID too. That's great. Thank you. Maybe Nicholas on the research side too, probably.
If like a lot of the things I've done research in kind of relate back to energy or energy systems. And one thing that I think, and a lot of people studying carbon capture or methane upgrading in academia, I think this is where it's going as well, is there will soon be a decent amount of jobs in industries trying to clean up essentially the gases that we release from our plants, whether they're power plants or just chemical plants. A lot of this isn't like for carbon dioxide, we have some regulations on it right now, but if those become more strict, we will have engineers that need to design these things and then maintain them and operate them as well. It's something that Canada has been doing steadily since the mid-2010s or so. Some of the first plants would have been like Estevan in Saskatchewan. It's an amine plant, scrubs out the carbon dioxide. But also like helium is something that's going to be important going forward. Most helium is generated in the United States from natural gas wells. a lot of it can actually be pulled out of Canadian wells as well, but it's kind of a emerging technology. And especially as the price of that goes up, I have a feeling that people will be interested. So I guess the short answer is, with climate change, a lot of new industry, I think, will be developed. I don't know how soon those jobs will be, but it definitely on the research side, we're already preparing for it.
Very interesting. I didn't know a lot of that. Thank you. Courtney, do you have anything to add, working in environmental as well?
Yeah. So Canada announced like their climate strategy just at the tail end of last year, and they have the net zero emission target by 2050. So there's a long road ahead, and it's going to leverage or need to leverage a lot of what Nicholas alluded to in terms of carbon capture and other technologies to make sure that we're getting our energy or offsetting it through credits or other methods. I don't think oil and gas will be going anywhere anytime soon. We need our energy source from somewhere, especially for developing these other technologies. If you go to the Government of Canada's website, there's so much information there regarding the climate strategy. It talks about solar and wind. I think that will be, it already is, like we have solar projects and wind projects within Alberta. I think that's only going to continue to grow, and other alternative renewable energy sources. And then even for oil and gas companies, I think a lot of them are putting more of a focus on their ESG reporting. A lot of like the public and shareholders and investors are putting a lot of attention on this. So I think that area within oil and gas is going to continue to grow. So I think there is still lots of opportunity in the oil and gas sector, but the alternative sector in renewables is also going to grow too.
Just, I'd like to add something right there too. In the United States, actually, right now, solar is becoming the largest energy sector. I have a feeling too that sooner or later that would also come up here.
Great, thank you guys. And Brent, maybe we also have an add-on to that question. What industries could Maddies look forward to? I know you graduated materials, so.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what everybody's saying about some of the new energy sources that are coming online down the future. But I would caution everybody not to give up on oil and gas. Not because there's going to be an awful lot of new assets being built, new plants and things being built, but it's increasingly becoming more difficult to actually get a new pipeline built or get a new plant built. And what's the result of that is those assets are aging, and they are going to be operated in many cases well beyond their original life cycle. So integrity, pipeline integrity, tank integrity, this niche group for material and chemical engineers, I think is going to continue to grow, and the challenges are going to get unique because, as I mentioned, assets are going to be older, and we're going to be tasked with making sure these things don't cause environmental damage for 100 years when it was designed for 50. And those are unique challenges, and I think that's going to be a big part of it. And I would also mention that the demographics of at least the industry that I work in are really changing rapidly. There is an awful lot of kind of older people that have been in that industry that are coming into retirement age and are moving out. And there's a huge, huge brain drain right now in the integrity world, with an awful lot of experience and knowledge leaving the industry. And as a result, there's creating a ton of opportunities for entry-level engineers and mid-level engineers to try to fill that vacuum. And it's going to create some additional challenges for the industry. But I think that's going to continue to be a growing sector, specifically in Western Canada for sure.
That's good news for a lot of people listening in. Thank you for that. Rena, did you have anything to add about industries that you've worked in or currently work in maybe? Or
we actually had a kind of this week, we have these kind of skill pool meetings, and being in like the process engineering skill pool, we had our global discipline head just give us kind of an overview of where the skill pool is heading. And that question was kind of raised, like, are our process engineering skills going to be relevant, and how are they going to be used because of the kind of energy transition. And our global discipline had made a pretty, I think, a comforting comment that like as process engineers, basically we follow the molecule, and no matter what what industry we work in, the skills that we have are always going to be applicable, whether it's new energies or whether it is oil and gas. It's essentially the same skill set, and it's very transferable. And he also made a comment that as process engineers, we are basically like our greatest skill set compared to other types of engineers, that we're not really like a hard discipline. Like, we're process integrators, and we integrate, and we can take the kind of opinions and advice from different disciplines and be able to kind of have a general understanding, because we understand the process. So that skill set, he said, was something that was unique to kind of chemical engineers, and I totally agree with him. So I think that the fact that even if oil and gas does decline, and it's going to decline very slowly if it does, I still think there's always going to be opportunities for chemical engineers.
Rena. And we have some more questions here. So what does your day-to-day life look like at your workplace? I think we've got an overview so far, but if anyone has specifics of like what exactly you do, maybe from the second you get in, or I guess log into Zoom, depending on what your situation is, to continue on from there. Maybe Courtney, if you'd like to start.
Sure. I'll speak more to like my previous role in projects. So I managed facility projects for about 6 years for thermal assets, oil sands, or conventional. Spent about 2 years in each. Every day was a new day. Like when you're building a project out in the field, my one boss told me every day, clear your inbox because you don't know what's happening tomorrow. You could be getting a call at 4:30 on a Friday afternoon before a long weekend, and you have to solve a problem. Otherwise, you have guys and crews waiting on site, waiting for direction. But you also have to make sure you're doing it safely. You're making sure it's not going to impact your cost, and you want to make sure that you stay on schedule. So every day for projects, and basically anything could happen. So I think my number one thing would be, in any role, if you can get your inbox and your tasks down so you're ready for the next day, whatever it throws at you, that would be my biggest piece of advice.
Thank you, Courtney. Nicholas, do you have any want to talk about your day-to-day life?
Sure. Before COVID, and actually up until about a month ago when the university reclosed, I spent a lot of time in the lab. And when I wasn't essentially doing plumbing, I was doing codes, or writing codes to process my data or to do simulations. It's something I think that going forward as chemical engineers, at least process engineers, will become more and more of just a part of what we do, is simulating things instead of doing the actual experiments or in tandem. Right now, I'm on MATLAB for 8+ hours every day, doing some machine learning and running simulations. So
I don't know if a lot of people wanted to hear that about MATLAB, but thank you. Rosalynn, would you like to go next? Cool.
When I'm full of work, now my work really cut back due to COVID because people aren't having process hazards analysis meetings or HAZOP reviews, which is my area of expertise. So, but when like a year ago, I was so busy. So there'd be, like Courtney, clear your inbox first thing. Make sure there's no new work coming in that you've missed, and take care of the financials, because I'm president of my company as well. So there's always the financials and making sure that people get paid and the bills get paid, and that I have invoiced and that people are paying me. But the other big part of the job is preparing for review meetings, for HAZOP reviews. getting prepared, and then making the travel arrangements, going to the review meetings. And then the review meetings, they can last half a day or they can last 8 weeks. It depends on the scope, but it's 8 hours in front of a team. Sometimes it's 3 people, sometimes it's 22 people, and running the review meeting and asking the questions about what could go wrong and then answering them. So review meetings are very tiring. You're on stage all day long, every day, day in, day out, and then going back to your hotel. So it's quite taxing. And then you get to go home and write all the documentation up. So my 15 years with Shell in process experience and operations experience really prepared me to be a good HAZOP leader. And I'm grateful for that. And now I've been doing that job for 20 years. So the days, they have a sameness, but there's also a difference because every facility is different. Every process is different. Every team is different. Every company has a different culture, different risk tolerances. So it's fascinating. And after 20 years of it, I can put things into context and feel like I can really offer something to the clients. Hopefully when COVID ends, I'll get a few more jobs coming in, but yeah,
That's good.
Yeah, it's interesting work, boring and yet interesting.
Thank you. That was great. Rena, do you have anything to add?
So kind of very similar. Kind of first thing is always like your inbox. I try to leave like half an hour before I have my meetings to clear out my inbox. I think for me, maybe the main difference is like for our project, we work with a lot of different time zones. So it's a lot of like early mornings and late nights because we work with Japan, we work with the Philippines, and we also work with China. And so there's definitely a lot of days where I'm working from like 7 a.m. to like 10:30, like straight, with maybe like a lunch break and like a half an hour between there somewhere to kind of get in a workout. And so working from home actually has helped out a little bit. But yeah, it's I guess the one thing I didn't really expect from working from projects is that it's just like a lot busier than I expected. And I think before when I was working more at a site, I always thought site was busier because there's stuff happening that's live. And I always thought, okay, like projects, like nothing's happening, like, you know, it's just all on paper. But now that I'm in projects, it's just extremely busy. And I think also because we're in detailed design right now, there's a lot of document review. So we get about I want to say like 50 documents per day to review, and contractually there's implications if we don't review them within a certain time frame. So that creates a lot of work as well. And then the other thing is HAZOPs and also RBIs, those workshops also take up a lot of your time. So yeah, that's kind of what my day-to-day looks like. A lot of meetings, and then kind of trying to actually do work between the meetings. Yeah. Oh, and I think my biggest piece of advice is probably just prioritizing. I find that in my role there, and especially like when you're working in projects, there's a lot of meetings where there's a lot of participants, and I think sometimes you just have to pick and choose and say, okay, this is important to me, and I want to say in this versus, you know, this is really not my decision to make. Like I have opinion, but my opinion doesn't really matter. So it can kind of, I've definitely gained a lot of skills in terms of, you know, deciding where I need to contribute and where I don't need to be at a meeting, and trying to just manage my time and being empowered to say, I don't need to be at this meeting, I'm not going to attend. Yeah.
Thank you, Rena. And Brent, what's your day-to-day life look like?
These days, my quite similar to Rena's. An awful lot of document review, whether it's technical specs, proposals, contracts. You know, spending a lot of times learning legalese with the contracts and stuff like that, which is probably good because, to be honest, I'm not a very good engineer anymore, right? It's amazing how quickly, if you're not doing it every day, you lose certain skills. So, 10 years ago, it was an awful lot of data review, analysis of data, making recommendations, writing reports, like kind of pure engineering work on that side. And I'm just, most of the younger staff that work with our organization now are far better than I ever was. So I will let them do the engineering and I will stick to the kind of mentorship and business management side.
Thank you, Brent. We have another question. Well, it's kind of two questions then. What has been your biggest challenge from the pandemic, and how do you stay motivated in such uncertain times? So maybe we'll start with Rena.
That's actually such a great question because I've really struggled at the beginning of the pandemic. I don't really, I'm not really like a homebody, so I don't like to stay home. I pretty much kind of scheduled like literally every single space that was in my calendar. Like after work, I'd be doing this and this and this. So mentally, it was really difficult, but I think I got adjusted to it. And I think after I got adjusted, the next biggest struggle was like, when do you shut down? Because with like, for me, and I think for a lot of people, the work is always there. Like you have a to-do list and you're never done at the end of the day. And it's just this massive to-do list. So you really have to like set boundaries for yourself. And I wasn't super great at doing that at the beginning, which led me to working really, really long hours. So was probably the biggest struggle for me since the pandemic. And I think I've gotten better, but I can't say that I'm that's 100% a solved problem for me. So I'm still trying to improve in that area.
Thank you, Rena. Courtney, did you want to add anything there or have anything else to say?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, I started the role I'm currently in at the start of the pandemic. So April 1st was my first day of work in this new role. So I think that was the biggest challenge, is joining a new role, not being able to see my coworkers, not being able to actually know. I knew some people just from my work and projects. I had interaction with them for like regulatory environmental stuff, but not actually knowing them and knowing if I could call them at their house. The other benefit was that my team had, one of the managers had put together a scavenger hunt for the first 14 days of the pandemic. So every day we had to do the challenge and submit it to the chat. So I think that really helped me stay motivated during that time, like navigating not knowing who these people are and what their personalities were. So one of them was you had to make a fancy drink and name it. Another one was you had to find random things around your house in like the quickest amount of time. So that was a lot of fun, and it helped me get to know my coworkers in a short amount of time. And even if we were in the office, I don't think we would have been allowed time to go on a scavenger hunt every day. So it was nice.
Great. Thank you, Courtney. Rosalynn, you alluded earlier about the pandemic, and I imagine being president of your own company is probably difficult right now. So did you have anything to add there?
Rena said it was difficult to adjust to not having a full day, a full schedule. Yeah, I had the same thing. It was really difficult to think, maybe I won't get any new work ever again. But some new work did come in, and not as much as I would maybe have liked, but enough to hand in. So that was okay. I think we find other things to do, right? We have that part of our, like my work is only taking about half of my time right now. So I get the work done, and I have taken up the oboe. So I'm learning to play the oboe, and I'm practicing like an hour a day. and it's keeping my mind active, and I'm really happy, and I'm making progress, and it's actually sounding like music now. So yeah, we are whole people. We don't have to be just our jobs. And yeah, I'm having fun, and I guess when I get more work, I'll just have less time to practice. That's all.
And you'll be so good, you won't need to practice. Thank you, Rosalynn.
Yeah, we can dream, but yeah, I'll always have to practice.
For sure. Nicholas, do you want to go ahead with that one?
Basically, I'm going to say is a mixture of what I've heard already, but set your boundaries. I found, again, like most people at the beginning of the pandemic, I wasn't at an office anymore, so it was kind of hard to say like, oh, you know, this is the end of the day. This is where I should stop. I'm sitting in my office right now, and I would wake up and then just walk over here. It's a lot easier to just overwork in these situations. So what I started doing was just breaking up my tasks for the day into like smaller and smaller portions, and then make sure I also take breaks in between there. And I also play musical instruments sometimes during my breaks. The most recent one I picked up was banjo.
Awesome, thank you. And Brent.
Yeah, I had a couple of challenges this summer. From an operational perspective, you know, I was setting up an office in California, and setting up an industry or an office in a COVID hotspot where you can't be there in person to help people, you can't be there in person to provide direction to staff, hire people, things like that was a really big challenge. Don't think I ever want to do it again, but it also taught me some new skills on how to deal with it. But another thing that we saw a lot with the pandemic was in an office environment, just wandering around an office, you see people every day, and you pick up on social cues, body language, and you can determine whether people are enjoying their life, hating their life, stressed out, etc. And when we're all behind computer screens, you can't see a lot of that information. And I think there was an awful lot of staff that were struggling, whether it be for professional reasons or personal reasons due to the pandemic. And I couldn't see them, and their coworkers and peers couldn't see them. So it's very difficult to determine whether somebody's, you know, what their mood is and whether they're struggling. And we learned pretty quickly that we had to force ourselves to make overtures, have sessions like this, do a Teams meeting with Jackbox games to be lighthearted, or just have a friendly video chat with somebody. And you would really get a good handle as to whether they were coping well with it. So, you know, yeah, feel free to be, you know, even for you students, my niece is in college right now at U of A, and same thing. She can't interact socially with her friends the way she used to. And I can see that in her. So, you know, make sure you reach out to your friends, your colleagues, and force that communication so that everybody's, you know, keeping tabs on everyone.
Great, yeah, thank you guys. And we have about 15 minutes left. So if anyone will leave a little time for people to ask last minute questions in the chat, but if anyone has some last minute pieces of advice, that was another question, or not a question, I guess more of a statement for everyone. If anyone wants to interject here, or if you guys don't, then that's fine too. We might give a few minutes. Rosalynn, go ahead.
Yeah, I had some thoughts. This is a tough time to be graduating from with a degree. My own son graduated last April with a freshwater science degree, and he got a couple of job interviews, and then they were canceled because of COVID. So he's still looking. And he ended up working at a hat store in the mall, you know, just to get some money. So it's not an easy time. And so I wrote something. You might feel, and I had the same problem when I graduated during a severe recession. And my sister-in-law said, "You, it's the situation. Rosalynn, it's not you, it's the situation." It was hard for me to internalize that, but after 36 years of being an engineer, I can look back now and say, it wasn't me, it was the situation. So you might feel that COVID has screwed over your career just when it's starting, but it probably hasn't. Remember, we've all been in the same boat. We've all been struggling and had, work interruptions. So prospective employers will understand gaps in your work experience. They'll understand gaps in parts of your life. And, everybody's going to have that happen. So there will be understanding. So stay hopeful and don't quit. If you believe you want an engineering career, go for it. Just keep pushing. And eventually it will happen.
Just to add on to what Rosalynn was saying, in the situation that she brought up, where somebody's working at a hat store, put that on your resume. Don't be ashamed of that, especially in this pandemic period. As an employer who's looking to hire somebody, I want to see candidates that are willing to do whatever it to find a job that they really, really want. And if I see somebody who worked at a hat store, that's going to be one of the first questions I ask is, why were you working at a hat store? And if their response is, well, you know what, I needed a job, or, I couldn't find something in my main field, so I had to expand my horizons and go look elsewhere. That's a really, really good thing for me to hear as an employer, because that shows somebody that has a lot of drive, a lot of initiative, is hardworking, and is willing to, do whatever is necessary. And I think that's actually, to Nicholas's point earlier about not knowing what your biggest skills are, somebody who might leave that off their resume thinking that's a positive move, they might actually do the opposite. And it might create the wrong optics for somebody who's looking to hire an individual.
Thank you. Those are great pieces of advice. I think I can speak for myself and a lot of others. I know we lost internships or new grad positions in this last year, and had to take other things that maybe weren't as engineering focused. So that's, I think, very positive thing for us to hear. Thank you, guys. Maybe Nicholas, do you have any last words for the panel if we get no more questions?
Anything immediately, but I can hang around in case anybody has some other questions.
Sure, thank you. Courtney, do you have any last thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is one of the prompt questions that was sent out ahead of time. That's why it's coming to mind, is don't worry about picking the wrong career path. You'll learn something along the way. It may not be the best fit for you right now, but you'll learn something. Like for me, I actually did career counseling 2 years ago because I didn't know what I wanted to be as a grown-up, and I am a grown-up. So you can switch things up, and I took the time and dove deep into what my skills were, what my talents were, what my interests were, what my beliefs were, and my personality, and sort of like where that all intersected is kind of where one of the reasons why I pivoted into this environmental realm, because that's based on my I guess deep dive into myself. It's like that's what came out. It's like this is what's important to me. This is what I want to do. So if you do have time on your hands right now, take that exploration and see where it leads you, would be my advice.
Thank you, Courtney.
Actually, to add on to that, a lot of graduate advisors are having a hard time getting students because most Chemie and Maddie graduate students are international. So if you're looking for a job, you might be able to find one at the university doing research, especially if you're in Edmonton right now.
Definitely some great news for people listening. And Rena, did you have any last advice for people listening in here?
I think, and this is an advice that I kind of always give myself as well, because I know I'm not super great at doing this, is just kind of believe yourself and be bold and ask for the things that you want, because people won't know if you don't ask, and kind of just be a driver in your own career path.
That's great. Thank you, Rena. I guess we can conclude here. I think we got less questions, unless someone has anything they'd like to add. We do have 9 minutes left, and also just another reminder, we have the networking and the expo sessions. They should be on the left of your screen here. Or you guys, panelists, thank you again for your time. I know it's greatly appreciated among the student community. So thank you for that. And yeah, we'll stick around for a bit if anyone does have questions in the chat, I suppose, till 7. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for facilitating. I know it's kind of not easy to facilitate these sessions, especially in a virtual environment.
Yeah, I'm sorry I sound so awkward.
No, you don't. Trust me.
It's a new platform for me too with Hobson. So thank you guys. You guys were great panelists. So.
Okay,
Nobody talked
thanks.
on mute. Good job.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
I do that once a day, so I'm proud of myself.
Yeah, I feel that for sure.
Want to see my dog?
Sure.
Yes, I do.
That's one thing I love about the working from home is you get to see everyone's pets. Like you'll see a cat like pop up and walk across.
Oh yeah.
Or kids, especially
Yeah,
when they were all at home. It was
Yeah.
awful and fun at the same time.
Oh, puppy.
Thank you. What kind of dog is he or she?
This is Sydney. She's a wire-haired dachshund cross from the SPCA.
Oh, so cute. Don't let my cat. Oh, she's awake now. She's on.
Here's a question for everybody. What do you think the odds of the majority of the workforce staying at home, even post-pandemic? I know that there's an awful lot of chatter about it. What are your thoughts, or what are your companies thinking of doing?
I think more traditional companies are going to have people back in the office just because of who is in the leadership role and how their views are on virtual workplaces. I think more modern industries or companies might have them more, offer more flexibility to work from home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. You know, downtown Calgary, everybody was returning back in September for what, a month?
Yeah.
And then it got shut back down. So it'll be an interesting dynamic for the next year.
Mm-hmm.
My company's always worked from remote locations, all of us. So it didn't make any difference except the ability to get new work. So, yeah.
Rena, are
Very
you
excited to go back into the office and I work with. It's also very nice not to walk 20 minutes to my lab. So I'll be looking forward to having my office just 2 floors underneath it.
Mm-hmm.
Are you in Kitimat, Rena?
No, I'm actually in Calgary. So our LNG Canada project is like spread across like so many locations. So we have people in Kitimat. We have people in Calgary, and there's 2 office locations. But this is all before the pandemic, of course. Now everyone's working from home. We had an office location in Shell Center, which is in downtown, and then we have an office location in the south because all the engineers sit actually at the contractor's office, so we can kind of collaborate easier and just be able to discuss issues face to face. And then we have locations in China in the fabrication yards, so we have people working there. And then the inside battery limit scope is done in Japan, so we have engineers sitting there as well with JGC. Where else do we have? Yeah, and we have an office in Vancouver as well. So that's most of the external relations people, and then of course Kitimat. So our approach is that we've realized kind of we can work virtually from this pandemic. So going forward, like even after this blows over, it's going to be kind of a remote working unless you need to go in an office, then you go in to do what you need to do, but then come back to your kind of home office to work, because we have so many virtual meetings anyway, even when we were going to the office. So it's just, yeah, it doesn't really hurt to just have everyone work from home and then go in the office as an as-need basis. So it's kind of a new approach they're taking. So that's interesting, I think.
I think in BC, some places are open a little more than here in Alberta. I have a friend who works at a bank in Kelowna on the office side, and they're open. So that's why I was asking. I wasn't sure maybe if you're half in the office still.
No, working from home. Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. Thank you. You think we'll be back on campus next year, Nicholas? Do you have any thoughts on what you think might happen?
They too, because attendance now is down. People don't want to go to university online. So I know they're going to be trying to, but it depends on how the vaccines get rolled out. I know the government wants to have it done by fall, but I have no idea. If it's following how the US has been handling it, it's going to get pushed back.
Makes sense. And in the chat, Kenny said, Nicholas, one of the best TAs I've ever had, and he hopes you're doing well. I'm not sure you saw that.
Thank you.
I would echo that. You definitely were.
Well,
That's good.
I had quite a few semesters to practice, and it's part of the reason why I was doing that TA that kind of solidified me wanting to be a teacher. So I'm glad also I'm able to project that.
For sure. All right, well, if no one has anything else to add, I guess we can probably conclude early and let people get over to the networking and expo, or just sign off. Again, thank you so much for your time, guys, and thank you for everyone who listened in tonight and asked questions. Yeah, thanks, guys. Have a good night and stay safe.
Thanks
Yeah,
all.
great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Take care.
See ya.
Thanks.
You.